Welcome to the New Life Church Letchworth podcast, where faith meets everyday life and hope is always within reach. We're so glad you're here. Each week we gather to grow, to learn, and to be inspired. And whether you're part of our church family or listening from afar, this space is for you. A place to be encouraged, challenged, and reminded that with Jesus, there was always a new beginning. So get ready, open your heart, lean in, and together let's discover a life worth living.
Morning. Woo. Hey, for those of you who aren't yet aware, we've been doing a series over the last few weeks. We've been journeying like the last sort of few days of Jesus' life, if you like, the last week. Some people call it Holy Week. If you grew up in a traditional church environment, you might have known it as Holy Week. And we've been looking at that day by day. And we've been journeying along. And as we've been going through this journey along with retracing, if you like, Jesus' steps, we've been asking this question, like, why in the world did he just keep going? You know, because it's not like he didn't know what was coming. It's not like he didn't know where this road was headed, you know. Now, if I get on the M6 and if I head north, I know where it's going, right? I mean, eventually we'll get traffic. Yeah, no, we'll hit Birmingham. But if you keep going, we're going to hit, Manchester. If you keep going, we're going to get to Preston and Lancaster and the Lake District and Scotland, right? I know where the road is going. And Jesus knew where the road was going, the road that he was on. He knew where it was going. He knew exactly where it was taking him, but still he went. And we've been asking why. If you've missed anything, you can catch up on YouTube. You can catch up on our podcast. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do. It's the easiest way to follow and be reminded of everything. But as I was thinking about this message this week, I was remembering a story of when our kids were little. And you might have done this with your own children, or you might have done it with nieces and nephews, or you might have seen it. It's where you rough and tumble or play fight or wrestle, or where I'm from, you say wrestling. Anyway. And what we would do is take our couch cushions off and we would set up full-on WWE rings. Yeah. And now my eldest had a WWE championship belt. So he would come down on his belt. He would come down all kitted out and, climb up onto the sides of the couch and full on, dive on me and elbow me and pretend he could pile drive me and tombstone me and all those kind of stuff. And I mean, we were into WWE at the time. So there's so much going on and it basically would beat me up, right? But he didn't really beat me up because I actually was more powerful. Right? I mean, I was stronger. And I let him beat me up, right? And everybody, that this is what happens when you do rough and tumble with kids. You actually hold back. And if you've never done that, you've done it in a different way. Maybe you've got something at home that is actually priceless or fragile. And the way you handle that thing, even though you could destroy it, you could actually break it. The way that you take care of that heirloom or that item is actually with tenderness and care, and your strength is under control. Your power and your ability is effectively held back, so you can take care of that precious piece of crystal or whatever it is you might have, or you hold your power back, even though you could have hurt that person really badly who was, elbow dropping me and knocking the wind out of me or whatever, And the same thing, this is crazy, this got me thinking about it, the same thing happens with Jesus. On the night he's arrested, and David talked about this last week, David talked about the moment in the garden, and the night he's arrested, there's this thing that happens. Peter, the fisherman, whips out a sword, and he cuts somebody's ear off, okay? I mean, anyway, moral of the story, don't bring a fisherman to a fight, right? I mean, what the heck? Why would we do that? And Jesus says to him, he says, put your sword away. He says, put it away. He says, don't you know that I could call on my Father and he would send more than 12 legions of angels for me to command? He's like, man, I do not need you fighting for me, especially if the best thing you can do is just get an ear. I mean, think about it. Like, how in the world did you just get an ear? You know, it's like, it's such a, I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? You know? So, yeah. Anyway, but he says, I could have brought down 12 legions of angels. And a Roman legion is 6,000 soldiers. That's 72,000 angels. Jesus is effectively saying, I do not need you and your wimpy little sword. I've got 72,000 angels at my beck and call. That's what he's saying, you know? But he's effectively letting them win. He's holding back his power. He lets himself to be taken away. They take him away that night. They take him away. They question him. They put up a mock trial. They begin to interrogate him. The Jewish leaders are questioning him and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And then they're not allowed to put Jesus to death. So the Jewish people they couldn't execute anyone, to be honest. So the Jewish people were under Roman rule and Roman law. They had to follow the Roman laws. And they couldn't decide in terms of judge and jury to execute people. So they had to get the Romans to basically get rid of Jesus. And this is what happens if you read the story. You can read the whole narrative in John chapter 19. And if you don't have a Bible, we've got Bibles for you at the back. If you don't have one, grab one for your charge. And the Bible basically helps us understand. It's the story of Jesus and the importance of Jesus all throughout history, from the beginning to the end. It's all about Jesus. You can read about it yourself in John chapter 19 for more details. But effectively what happens is the Jewish leaders hand Jesus over to the Roman governor, and his name was Pontius Pilate. And they say to him, like, you know, we can't execute him, so you've got to basically take over for us. And it says that when Pontius Pilate interrogates him, Pontius Pilate also interrogates him and begins to ask some questions. And this is where we read the story where Pilate decides to whip him and beat him because he can't find anything else wrong with him. So he thinks, I'll just punish him, basically. I'll just make a spectacle. I don't want to be seen like a wimp. I'm going to, smack him about a bit. So this is where you read about him being whipped. And this is where you read about, you might have seen the imagery, even if you've never been to church before, or if you're not even a follower of Jesus yet, you've seen these ideas where there's pictures of Jesus with this crown of thorns on his head. And this is where we get it from. In John 19, it says the soldiers took some thorns and they twisted them into a crown and then placed them on his head. And this is where it all happens. It says they took a bit of purple and threw it on him as a robe to mock him and say, you're the king of the Jews. This is where we read about him being hit with sticks, and it says with a staff, and being slapped and spit upon. And you read about the narrative of what's going on there. And Jesus is effectively letting them win. Right? He's holding back his power. He's got 72,000 angels plus. But he's holding back. He's holding back. And then we have this explicit exchange. After he's been whipped, Pilate interrogates him. And he says, don't you realize that I've got the power to either set you free or put you to death? John 19, verse 10. I can let you go, or we can crucify you. And Jesus' response is this. Man, you would have no power over me if I hadn't given it to you. You'd have no power over me if it wasn't given to you. I mean, what a dynamic going on, right, in this situation? Here he is being beaten and whipped, and Jesus is saying, man, you've got no power. You've got no power at all. Jesus is holding back. He's letting himself lose. He's letting them win. He's basically saying to Pilate, you've not caught me. I've given myself to you. This isn't involuntary. This is voluntary, meaning this is my choice. He's saying to Pilate, you're not in control here. Same thing he was saying to Peter. Peter, put your sword away. Don't you know? Because in the narrative where he talks to Peter, he then goes on to say This is what had to happen. This is what was always prophesied. If you read the story in Matthew 28, Jesus is saying to Pilate, you're not in charge. And this is the tension of the whole story. This is what we've been looking at this entire journey, this entire series throughout Easter. This is what we've been looking at. Because over and over you see that Jesus actually could have stopped it. Jesus had the power to prevent it. Jesus could have gone another way. But for some reason, he carries on. Still, he went. Still, he went. And after this, the story carries on. And after this exchange with Jesus and Pilate, this is where it then says, Pilate handed Jesus over to be crucified. He couldn't find anything wrong with him. They shouted, crucify Jesus. They wanted Barabbas. They wanted to do a prisoner swap, an exchange. So they decided to swap Jesus out for somebody else. Can't find anything wrong for him. So they have this like loophole to be able to crucify him. And you've got all these political power dynamics going on. You can read about it yourself. It's like first century Game of Thrones stuff going on here, right? This is John 19. You can read about it. And this is where Pilate hands Jesus over to be crucified. And crucifixion was what the Romans used for like slaves, right? I mean, this is a public spectacle to punish people. It wasn't like, it wasn't even talked about in polite Roman circles, they say. It was something they used to just keep the masses under control because it was shameful and it was just extreme, and they used it to keep slaves in their place. And reading the story, and then Jesus carries the part of the cross through the streets and up the hill, and once he gets to the top of the hill, they lay him down on the cross, and this is where you might have seen this before. Again, if you've never been a follower of Jesus, you might know some of this sort of story. This is where he's laying down, and they take nails and they drive him through his hands and his feet, and they attach him to these wooden beams, this cross, and then they lift it up and they leave him there to hang. And if you've seen the religious art, the religious imagery from the Middle Ages onwards, it's basically sanitized. If you've seen any pictures of the crucifixion, the old paintings, there's like a couple little drips, a couple little bits of red on his feet. It was very sanitized. And the reason they did it originally was because they wanted to present it as victory, not defeat. But when we look at it nowadays, it's sort of a bit like, it just seems very tame. It doesn't look really like what you would have expected it to look like. And so maybe in our heads we might imagine something that's a bit more tame and a bit more sanitized, a bit more censored, if you like. But it would have been awful. It would have been horrible. And it wasn't symbolic or poetic. It was actually violent. And it was unimaginably cruel. It was humanity being the worst they can be to another human. To just beat somebody, just to beat them and hurt them, just to make them suffer. I mean, that's humankind being the worst that we can be to one another. And maybe you've experienced that. Maybe somebody in your life has been they're just nasty, right? Maybe you've had a colleague like that, or a friend, or a family member, or a student, and one of your friends at school. People that are just nasty for no reason other than to just be nasty. Like, take that and turn it up. Just turn the volume all the way to max. Here you have Roman soldiers doing their daily job and just being let loose on a victim. It's horrible. It's unimaginably cruel. It's actually shockingly inhumane. It's disgusting. And it's humiliating, and it's public. And the one person who had the power to stop it all, the one person who, it says in the book of Psalms, holds the world in his hands, is being held himself by a few nails. The one whose voice would be able to speak to a storm and tell it to stop. The one whose voice spoke out to a dead man and said, Lazarus, come on. It's not your time yet. Come on out. Come on out of the tomb. The man whose voice had that much authority kept quiet. He held back all of his power. He held it back. He lets them win. He called Lazarus. He could have called 72,000 angels down. But he didn't. Still, he went. Still, he went. And the question really is why? This is what we're looking at this series. Like why? Why in the world? And to everybody watching, isn't it just like the moment goes terribly wrong? Isn't this like the most epic failure ever? A few days earlier, the whole city is like saying, Hosanna, we're so happy, this is new. You're going to be the new king. This is what they were doing. They thought he was the new king. And here he is being treated like a common slave, exchanged for a criminal, used as a public spectacle on the machine of Rome, Jewish leaders politically maneuvering to get rid of him in the way that only they could, because they couldn't put him to death. They had to get somebody else to do it. Here they are. Why didn't it turn out differently? Why did he just keep going? I mean, when Jesus was misunderstood, why didn't he correct it? When Jesus was betrayed, why didn't he defend himself? When people decided to do things their own way, why didn't he speak up? Why not? When he was falsely accused, he could have said something. He could have defended himself. They didn't even have any evidence. But because he didn't say anything, they didn't know what to do. He could have said something. He could have spoken up. He could have defended himself. When he was beaten, he could have stopped it. Why didn't he? Why did it happen like this? And if you think about it, everything is crazy and noisy. If you think about the drama of the scene almost, if you imagine like it said that the crowds were screaming, crucify, and then they decided to swap Jesus out with Barabbas. They swap him out. And you can imagine the crowds, the throngs of people in Jerusalem. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people have come to Jerusalem because it's the religious Passover, which is a massive religious festival that you had to attend if you were a Jewish male. So this place is crammed, it's rammed, it's so busy. And there's so much going on. Imagine all these crowds, the noise and the chaos and the animals and the children and the soldiers and the music, everything that's going on, all of the sounds and the scenes. And they're marching up to this hill. This is the climax of everything. This is going to be the main moment. And it says then there was, after Jesus dies, there's just like silence. It's just like, it's all over. It's all over. And you just imagine feel that tension yourself, Just imagine if you were there, what that would have been like. Only silence, except for the sobbing that punctuates the crowd here and there. And that's kind of I imagine it's almost like the dry heaving sort of sobbing, if you've ever done that level of ache and grief. The kind where you almost don't even have a voice anymore because it just hurts so much. You just wonder what was happening in that space. It would feel like everything has fallen apart, wouldn't it? If you're one of Jesus' followers, it's like heaven is now quiet. The prayers are gone, totally unanswered. Everything feels like a failure, and even hope itself would be dead. Just put yourself in that situation. Put yourself in those shoes. And you're not. I'm not surprised that the disciples, it says that basically everybody left Jesus in the end. Of course they did. When hope has been ripped out from underneath you, you don't know where to go. You just know you don't want to be there. You don't want to be around people, right? Of course you're leaving. And maybe they're frightened for their lives. And you can understand them asking, why didn't this turn out differently? Why didn't it turn out differently? love would not let Jesus give up, would it? You know, people that day it says in Matthew, they were standing there shouting at him. They were like, in Matthew 27, verse 40, it says this. It says, hey, if you're really the Son of God, why don't you come down? It says they're mocking him. You saved others. Why don't you save yourself? At the very end, he has another opportunity to like defend himself. If you really are the Son of God, do it. And like, what a perfect opportunity, right? In this moment, like this is when you could have really shown everybody who you are. Right? I mean, you can imagine the scene. I mean, Hollywood, like the lights, the sound. It would be very cinematic. The music would be changing. He would slowly just pull his one arm off the side of the cross. And they'd be like, yeah, and then his other hand, right? And he'd look down at them like this. Yeah. And he began to like lift himself off the cross, and like it would just be like all these wounds would start to just immediately disappear, and he'd just sort of hover. And then you'd see like 72,000 angels fill the sky behind him, and you would wet yourself and run screaming away in fear, right? But what a moment. He could have actually done it. One more time, he's asked at the very end, go ahead, prove yourself. Prove yourself. Do it. And I gotta be honest with you. If I was in that situation, it is so easy to prove ourselves. You ever been attacked unjustly? You ever been accused of something unjustly? Isn't it easy to try to defend yourself? It is for me. Maybe I'm the only one in the room. I'm like, man, as soon as somebody says, you did this or you did that, I'm like, no, I didn't. It was not me. Let me tell you what happened, right? And Jesus is accused time and time and time again. He keeps quiet. And then when you have the opportunity to prove your innocence, I'm like, see, I told you it wasn't me. This is the evidence. This is it. I have to prove myself. And it's so tempting. I would have, if I was in that, I have to say, if I was in his shoes, I would have been so tempted to prove myself, to justify myself, to explain myself, to do it, you know? But he stays there. And he stays quiet. And he stays not because he enjoys pain, not because suffering is somehow some noble act. He's not doing that. He stays because of one thing alone, love. Love held him there. Love held him there. And this is the whole crux of the whole story. It was not an accident. It was on purpose. This is intentional. This is deliberate. This is a choice. And we know, because it tells us in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I think all record it, they say Jesus didn't come to give, to be served, but to give his life away. And this is what's happening here. Effectively, he's saying, you aren't taking my life, I'm giving my life. The cross is Jesus choosing to absorb everything broken about humanity. Betrayal, violence, misunderstanding, injustice, pride, fear, shame, hate. The most ugly side of humanity. He's taking it all. And all of those things can fall under one word, sin. He's taking all of it. All of it. The cross is where all of the mess lands. And the one who had the most power takes all the hits. He took it all. And instead of responding with anger, he responds with forgiveness. Right? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. What? What, is this like the first time around for the Roman soldiers? This is the first time at the rodeo? First time seeing a capital punishment? First time having to beat up a prisoner? What do you mean they don't know what they're doing? Of course they know what they're doing. On a human level, they know exactly what they're doing. And instead of responding with anger, he responds with forgiveness. Father, forgive them. They do not know what they're doing. Instead of revenge, there's mercy. Instead of calling down legions of angels to destroy the unbelievers, Jesus offers grace because he takes it all, everything. It's not weakness, it's strength held back. It's the hands of the universe, powerful enough to crush everything, gently picking it up and taking care of humanity. Even though humanity spits in his face, beats him, misunderstands him, he's dealing with fragile humanity. Its strength held back. Its power under control. Just because he knows what he's dealing with is fragile. This is what's happening at the cross. And this is where, for us, it actually becomes personal. Because some of us have been in places where we know exactly what it's like to feel like heaven has gone silent, or to feel like things have been a failure, or a disappointment, or a regret. Or we have questions with no answers. And sometimes we're left wondering even if God himself has given up on us. That's what the disciples would have felt. But when we look to the cross, if we know that Jesus stayed knowing every single failure, every doubt, every future mistake that we would ever make, and if he didn't give up on us then, he won't give up on us now. Because he stayed. If he didn't give up then, he will not give up now. So what we need to do is learn how to change our thinking. Here's what I mean. Sometimes we can think following Jesus is actually, or going to church or being a Christian is actually behavior modification. That means you try to behave differently and it changes your behaviors. Well, it's not actually about behavior modification. Because when you think it's behavior modification, you think you have to change something about yourself. Like you have to try harder, you have to be better, you have to fix yourself, you have to clean yourself up, you have to prove yourself. But what happens on the cross is we begin to recognize that we aren't the ones that prove ourselves. Jesus proved himself. What price can we pay that's greater than the price that's already been paid? So what happens? The cross is an exchange. The cross is a swap, if you like. Because we bring our guilt, he gives us grace. We bring our unimaginable cruelty, and he gives us his unimaginable forgiveness. We bring our aches and pains, our frustrations, the worst of ourselves. We bring our misunderstandings. We bring our betrayals. We bring our junk. We bring everything. And instead of responding with anger or violence, he responds with forgiveness and mercy. The cross is a massive exchange. It's the swap. We bring our debts, and he gives us a fresh start. We bring our sin, and he offers salvation. This is what happens. The Apostle Paul, many years later, about 30 years after this, 20 to 30 years after this, he writes this in a book called Corinthians, which is to a group of followers of Jesus, an early community in Corinth. And he writes this. Here's how he describes it. He says, God put everything that was wrong on him so that we could be made right. That's the exchange. Everything wrong, the worst of humanity, all of the ugliness put onto him. Why? So we could be made right. Every lie, every secret, every selfish ambition, every decision, every sin put on him. All of it. The closest example I could think of, I was trying to think of a way to illustrate it. The closest example for us to understand, I was thinking like, if you're walking down the road and all of a sudden this car loses control and somebody pushes you out of the way and they effectively save your life, that, they pushed you out of the way with this car. But in so doing, and so pushing you out of the way, and so doing, the car hits them instead. And they take the hit. That was actually headed towards you. But they took it instead. And you walk away, and they lie there in a bloody mess. That's the cross. He's hanging there in a broken, bloody mess. And he takes the hit when it should have been ours. God put everything that was wrong, all of the wrong, so that we could be made right. So I want to invite you, whether you're in the room or online, here's the invitation. Jesus offers a new life. I want to offer, maybe you're saved already this morning. If you're not saved, today could be the day that you say yes to Jesus. If you're watching this, today could be the day that you say yes to Jesus. I want to give my life to Jesus. I want to follow Jesus. This is the kind of thing I want to be involved with. So if you are not yet a follower of Jesus, I'm going to ask you to do something really brave in a moment. In a moment, I'm going to ask if we would all put our heads down and not look around. And I'm going to ask you in a moment to think about giving your life to Jesus. And the way you'll do it is put your hand up and let me know. So if we could, just put your heads down for a moment, because this is between you and God. And today could be the day that you say yes to following Jesus. And if you're ready to give your life to Jesus, what I'd like to ask you to do, no one's looking around, is just raise your hand. And if you're joining us online, you can put a comment on the chat and we can get in touch with you. But if you're in the room and you want to make that decision and say yes to following Jesus, just ask that you raise your hand. We can lift your heads and look forward now. Because what we want to do is, when we do this every time that we do this, is there's a prayer that we want to pray together. And we pray it, we all pray it together. And here's why we all pray it together. Because when you become a follower of Jesus, you don't do it on your own. You do it in community. You do it together with another. So whether you're new to Jesus or been following Jesus all your life, there's this prayer we're going to put on screen. We're going to all pray this together, please. It says this: Jesus, thank you for giving your life for me on the cross. I'm sorry for the times I've gone my own way. Today, I choose to follow you. Thank you for forgiving me and loving me. Amen. And if that was your first time praying that, please come speak to me afterwards. Speak to your small group leader. If you're online, as I say, pop a comment online and we'll follow that up. I just want to also encourage you, if you did make that decision, one of your next steps is baptism. We're going to be doing that on the 10th of May. And maybe you're not yet done baptism. If you'd like to be baptized, we will be doing that, as I say, on the 10th of May. And just to be clear, baptism isn't about saying my life's sorted. It's basically a public declaration just to say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus now. Baptism does not save you. Baptism is just a demonstration to say, my life was lived my way. Now I'm living it his way. It's like a public declaration moment. Also, as we get ready to wrap up, there on your seats, we've got some invitation cards. There might be somebody in your life that you think, you know what? They are carrying stuff that they don't need to carry. They're carrying heartache. They're carrying hurt. And more than anything, we'd love for them to encounter the love of Jesus. The worst thing that can happen is they decide to not come with you next Sunday. The best thing that could happen is they decide to come with you next Sunday and they have an experience with the living God who believes in them and wants to change their life. So take one of these cards with you, invite somebody along to sit with you, bring somebody with you next Sunday, please, as we wrap up our Easter series.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's message. We hope you found it encouraging. Remember, no matter where you are on your faith journey, you are never alone. God is with you, and we are here for you too. If this message spoke to you, please share it with a friend, and don't forget to connect with us online or in person. You can find out more about New Life Church at nlcletchworth.co.uk. We'd love to see you soon. Until next time, keep walking in faith, living in hope, and loving like Jesus.